Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's evening because we're here on the East Coast. My name is Irv Homer. We're broadcasting from irvhomer.com. And we do this Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And of course, you can go to our archive and check it out. You'll notice that the website, that is www.irvhomer.com. You can pick it up, link over to it, and catch the programs that we've done in the past. I want to thank all of you for the cooperation, the emails that we receive, the compliments that we received. So far, we haven't received any criticism yet because this program is not a commercial talk format. It is a program of information, instruction, discussion, and the contentious type of programming that I did in the past is not this type of format. As you know, we bring you interesting guests from time to time, and of course, many of the guests just want to thank you, Big Bear, and we'll have Murray Needleman, psychologist, coming on. And we do have a special guest tonight, a man that you've seen, you've heard, and has been a friend for many, many years. And that is John DiPrimio, Citizens for Common Sense. He is the organizer and founder. And I hate to say it, but John DiPrimio is a community organizer. And I know it's got a bad connotation, but I'll let John
Well, I guess that means I can run for president.
I guess it can mean. Anyway, Citizens for Common Sense has been in business, how many years, John?
Since 1997.
1990.
So we've celebrated, we've just passed our 10th year anniversary, and we're still a small organization. We're still trying to grow, and we are, and we're trying to make an impact, and I think we're doing that as well.
Well, now, in addition to that, John appears on radio stations as guest host around the dial. Why don't you tell our listeners, John, where you can be heard and when and how they can do it, and your website and all that kind of good stuff.
Well, occasionally I fill in for Darrell Berger at WNPV 1440 on the AM dial, and that show airs, depending upon when I fill in, it airs between noon and 1 o'clock, and you can reach us vis-a-vis our website at citizensforcommonsense.net. That's www.citizensforcommonsense.net, and there's all kinds of contact information there, as well as a forum that you can participate in. And if you should forget that web address, you can go to Irv's website and find our link there as well.
John DiPrimio and I got together many years ago when I have to say, John, that you and I were instrumental in stopping the first emissions testing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania because it was a fraud then. And we hooked up. I hooked up on WWDB. John hooked up on Citizens for Common Sense. We went to meetings. We went to hearings. We heard the information. We saw the fallacy of it. It was almost like setting up this gambling in Pennsylvania. They really screwed it up. And it was just a means of making money for the state that had no merit whatsoever. They used outdated emissions testing. They used outdated automobiles with no catalytic converters. And so over the years, we've kind of hooked in. John has been a guest of mine for many, many years on WBCB when it used to be a radio station. I don't know what it is today, but I don't pay too much attention to it because if I wanted to have a political party radio station, I would open up a Democrat station, but WBCB is strictly a Republican station, one-sided, and for a local station should be ashamed of itself. I recognize the fact that a very dear friend is one of the owners who had no influence whatsoever on me leaving, but Merrill Reese, one of the finest people that you'll get to know on the air and off the air, the voice of the Eagles, is indeed a gentleman, but the management of the radio station I just did not see get along together. It wasn't the employees there, although one employee I wasn't too choked up about, and she had a habit of introducing me as the crazy man on radio until I showed her how much money I made at WWDB, which was more than the President of the United States made, and Pat Wadling kind of changed her mind about me being crazy. So when you make that kind of money, I don't think they pay that to crazy people. Be that as it may, we haven't discussed, John, many of the issues that are coming down the pike that you discussed when you were on the radio station in Lansdale. WNPV, is it?
Yes, WNPV.
WNPV, or when you were doing a show on 1540 on New World Radio, or on your Citizens for Common Sense. John and I did not discuss anything before the program. When John used to appear with me, it used to be a contentious battle between the two of us on our opinions on many issues. This is not the type of program. So, John, I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes to open up with a comment or a statement, and then I'll make mine, and then we can have a discussion. And of course, you can join us on the chat room if you want to. Have any questions for John or Irv Homer or John DiPrimio, please feel free to get on the chat room, and we'll get the information on the air for you. And once again, this program is brought to you with the technological skills of my son Ron, and that's RGH Computer Services for all your computer problems. If you want to set this up in your office, your place of business, this type of operation, it can be done, and it is not cost prohibitive. And as other guests that I've had on the program, John, when I go on vacation, I want to do a little traveling. If I feel well, and if Shirley feels well, you can sit in for me here too, and take over the reins. So I feel confident in your professional skill as a broadcaster.
Thank you, Irv.
And also somebody who knows what he's talking about. So I'll let John make an opening statement or so, and then I'll make an opening statement of what I feel is important, and then we'll go have a discussion, John.
Well, for years here locally in the state of Pennsylvania, we've been following the exploits of a state senator who has been indicted. There's a 127 count indictment pending against State Senator Vincent Fumo, which comprises some 239 pages that make up this indictment against Senator Fumo. And we've been following his exploits for a number of years. I think since 2003 is when this whole investigation began. And here we are a full, I guess, 5 years later, and he's having his day in court. And the fact that he is being indicted and tried is all well and good and fine, and if he's found innocent, so be it. If he's found guilty, so be it. But the issue that I have a problem with right now is the fact that the taxpayers of the state of Pennsylvania, and because it's a federal case, the taxpayers of this nation are spending millions and millions of dollars to prosecute this individual. In addition to the cost of prosecuting this individual, the state of Pennsylvania is reimbursing his defense attorneys to the tune of more than $1 million. So not only do we bear the burden of prosecuting someone when they are accused of committing a crime, we also have to bear the burden of paying for his defense attorneys. I would love to see this policy changed. I would love to see the people, not only in the state of Pennsylvania, this isn't unique to Pennsylvania, I think this happens around the country. I would love to see the people in this nation stand up and demand that we stop this practice of defending and paying for the defense of criminals that are well-heeled enough to pay for their own defense, particularly in the case of Senator Fumo, who owns, I think, 4 houses, a multi-millionaire many times over, and why we are paying for his legal expenses are still puzzle to me. So I wish that we'd stand up and stop this practice. And if found guilty, at least not only should he make restitution to the taxpayers for the money that he will be found guilty, if he is found guilty, of defrauding them of, but he should be forced to reimburse the taxpayers at the state and federal level for the cost of prosecuting this case and for the money spent on his defense lawyers. So it is my hope, at least, that we begin a groundswell of opposition to this practice of paying for the defense of politicians that do the wrong thing. That is locally the thing that has me irked momentarily. The other thing on a national level that has me irked is the insanity taking place surrounding our presidential campaigns here. This community organizer versus mayor versus governor versus senator versus young versus old. The last time I checked the Constitution of the United States, the only qualification that was necessary to be president or vice president was you had to be age 35 and a citizen. That's it.
For 10 years.
For 10 years. You had to be a citizen for 10 years and 35 years of age. Now,
natural born.
Now, this whole nonsense surrounding whether or not you were a lawyer, a community organizer, picked your nose, compared to Jesus, the Pope, the mayor, the governor, Daughter pregnant. You know what? This election has gone from an issues-oriented campaign during the primaries to a personality contest. And the voters in this nation are going to deserve what they get because we're tolerating this nonsense on every conceivable level, whether it's the national news media on major market television stations or the cable news networks or the talking heads on the talk radio stations. They are all pushing this nonsense and not talking about issues. I want to know, look, Harry Truman was a haberdasher. Was he qualified to be vice president, much less president of the United States? I don't think so. Not based on the standards we set forth today. Did he turn out to be a halfway decent president? By most measures, yes. Now, I think we have to get beyond this, who's qualified, who's most qualified, who's not. Let's talk about their intentions. What are their intentions? What do they want to do when they get in office? What do they see as the problems that are facing this nation? How do they think it's best that they address those problems? Let the people of the United States make a real informed decision before they go to the polls on November 4th and stop this nonsense, this name calling, this branding, this popularity contest that both parties are engaged in, and apparently we, the electorate, are being entertained by.
John DiPrimio, opening statement, and I'll respond to it a little later, John, after I have a slight opening statement of my own. Watching the interviews by Judy Woodruff and the other gentleman, I don't even remember his name, he was so boring, of selection of John McCain and Barack Obama the other night at Columbia University, and the big debate was whether or not the ROTC, ladies and gentlemen, should be able to be on the campus of Columbia University. Well, apparently, maybe they don't read the same paper that I read, but we have a fuming controversy developing in Central and South America between Bolivia and Venezuela. And something happened this week, the first time since the Monroe Doctrine, which goes back many, many years, the two Russian, maximum weight Russian bombers landed in Nicaragua, or Venezuela rather, to participate in Venezuelan war games in South and Central America. Bolivia has recalled their ambassador to the United States. Venezuela has recalled their ambassador, and those two countries are not friends of the United States, and of course Russia is now an ally of theirs. That to me is more important on the national level than whether or not Obama or whether or not McCain is going to allow the ROTC meet on the grounds of Columbia University. They're not dealing with serious issues. Serious issues in America affects you and me. It affects crime on the streets. How much longer can we tolerate Philadelphia as the shooting capital? It's like a shooting gallery out there. Carjackings. A woman this week, 80 years of age, raped and killed in her apartment. This nonsense has got to come to a screeching halt. And yet we have an unfortunate funeral today of a Philadelphia police officer. And all the police were demonstrating and supporting. The church had a big mass for her and so forth and so on. Well, that's great. But what about the guy that got shot the night before? Or the woman that got carjacked the night before? Or the baby that was abandoned? These issues are not being addressed. Sure, I feel sorry for anybody that gets killed, police officer or not. But our priorities in this national election are so fouled up because of personalities and because of who struck John and whether or not community service. Community service, ladies and gentlemen, is a very, very important part of our society. And I heard one idiot today making fun of people who are active. Well, I've been active in community service for 35 years, handling chronic and terminally ill kids. So I don't think community service is funny. We fought for emissions controls, John and I. We fought for red lights on corners. We fought for stop signs. We fought for many things involving the community. Town Watch is a community-based organization. So from the ground level, and there are over 18,000 volunteer organizations that are considered to be community services. in this country. And for some people on radio or television to make fun of someone who, out of college, 20 years ago, got involved in community service, I think it's a fraud. It's covering up something. So my frustration level is higher than my anger level. And as you see, I'm not angry. It's just a frustration level. And that's my opening comment. And you can join us on the chat room if you care to. John, you mentioned Vince Fumo and the indictment of State Senator Vince Fumo. What I find interesting is that his previous attorney, Richard Sprague, who was first assistant district attorney under Arlen Specter, who was a proponent of gambling as one of the owners of one of the gambling casinos that may take place in Philadelphia, was formerly Vince Fumo's attorney. They were friends for years. Why they broke apart, I don't know. Was it Fumo's vote in Harrisburg against the casino locations, or was it not? Who took his place but a friend of mine, Dennis Kogan. Denny Kogan, if you're not familiar with the name, was the attorney that went to bat for Neil Ferber to get him off of death row because he was innocent under Arlen Specter, or rather Governor Rendell, when he was district attorney. And I find it interesting that Richard Sprague, who is now one of the city's leading defense lawyers, except to Vince Fumo, who bounced him, or he left, who used to put people in jail, now is a defense attorney to get the criminals out of prison and keep them from going to jail. So the problem is, I think we've got too many lawyers getting involved in our lives. But Vince Fumo, I believe, John, and this is, we can start our discussion with you, I believe Vince has got so much on some of these turkeys in Harrisburg, including the governor and defense lawyers and former prosecutors. I think they got to make a deal with him. If he blows the whistle, two things are going to happen, or three things. Either he's going to have a heart attack because he's copping a plea now, they don't feel well, or he'll cop a plea and say, I'll give you names, what kind of deal am I going to make? Or three, somebody's going to kill him.
Well, all those things are possibilities, but I find it amazing that during the process of jury selection, that he's already arguing his defense by saying that his lawyer under Richard Sprague, one of his associates, told him that it was okay to erase his emails.
Well, now not to interrupt you because I don't want to do this over talking, but wasn't Sprague said it wasn't him, but it was this guy Sardone or somebody or another?
Right.
It wasn't him. The other guy says, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. So already they're playing this word game back and forth of who told who, what, when, where, and how. The argument that I would make to that is, Fumo's a bright guy. I mean, he's a member of Mensa. He's been in the Senate for umpteen, I don't know how many terms, but he's been there a very long time. I think he's been there well in excess of 20 years in the Senate of the state of Pennsylvania. By all accounts, he is probably the brightest guy in Harrisburg as far as intelligence. Now, if you're going to tell me that this guy doesn't know it's against the law to erase his emails, then I'm going to tell you I got some swampland in Florida I'd like to sell you. Secondly, if you're going to tell me that his attorney told him that, knowing that the attorney is committing a felony by telling him to erase his emails, I'll tell you I have another piece of swampland in Florida I'd like to sell you. So, and the third thing I'd like to make with regard to this is ignorance is never a defense. So if he claims he erased his emails and didn't know he was breaking the law, that's still not a defense because ignorance doesn't play well in a fair and impartial court. If you break the law, you break the law, whether you knew it was the law or not. Ignorance generally is not a defense in a court of law. So, this whole nonsense, this theater that's taking place now outside the courtroom, this is just during jury selection.
Well, what I found interesting in the jury selection is that you and I are familiar with Vince Fumo because we've discussed it many, many times on the air before. And we followed Vince Fumo's career, and we followed the $14 million or $7 million, whatever it was, with his community-based organization down in South Philadelphia, this charity that he set up. But the fact is that they were polling jurors, and I think it started Monday. And or Monday rather of this week. Was it Monday when they started?
Monday of this week they started, yes.
And there were people who never heard of Vince Fumo.
Go figure.
Never heard of him, which is maybe not frightening to the average person, but I guarantee you there's many people out there that never heard of Vince Fumo, and I'm saying, where have you people been if you're a Pennsylvanian? And I think that's where they're drawing the pool from, not necessarily Philadelphia, but they never heard of Vince Fumo. I mean, this man has been in the press more than Mickey Mouse has been in Disney World.
Well, that's the reason why they haven't heard of him, because A, no one reads a newspaper today, and major market talk radio in the city of Philadelphia hasn't been talking about this because they're cowards in Philadelphia as far as talk radio goes.
Well, major market radio is corporate radio, and it's syndicated. Now, Rush Limbaugh is not going to talk about Vince Fumo.
Well, when I saw major market, we do have a couple local talk show hosts here in the Philadelphia
market. They're part
market.
and parcel of the corporate radio business that depends on these politicians to grant them these licenses to be fair and unbalanced. And they're not going to, and plus the fact they've got to get their advertising from these guys. So you're not going to find too much controversy on the, quote, local genre of talk radio.
Well, but they could tell you who the wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles were 3 years ago, but they can't tell you who Vince Fumo is. Well, I mean, that's our society today. We've become this very ignorant, very lost intellectually a society that pays attention to only the frivolous things. I mean, they can tell you how many kids Britney Spears has, and they can tell you where Paris Hilton is sleeping tonight, but they can't tell you who's on trial today for defrauding the people of the state of Pennsylvania under a 127-count indictment. I just don't understand that.
Well, the problem is they come to Irv Homer and John DiPrimio with Citizens for Common Sense when they need help. And that's what boggles my mind, when they should know who their state representative is, what the government has for them, the services and the provisions under consumer fraud and other things that we've discussed over the air, that they have that information available. But they can tell you, as you said, what are there, four sports stations in the Philadelphia market, plus what they bring in from New York because of the powerful signal of New York radio? And now the whole industry in America is sports and gambling. That's it. How big is the casino going to be? Where's it going to be? And are they going to have table games? And how much revenue it's going to generate? And that is America's mentality today. Not what happened to our production of goods and services in America. Not whether or not we can create new and innovative jobs. And in Friedman's new book, which is so fascinating, and I'm kind of, segueing into it, the country that develops the alternative energy source in the world today is going to be the country that is going to be the big boss. And there should be a concerted effort for the United States right now to put all of the dissension aside, the green gas, the windmill, and so on, to develop an energy source where American can be the owners and the innovators and the inventors of alternative energy source. Because as these countries like China and India and Europe and Central and South America and even Africa are developing, they're going to need energy. And the country that develops the energy, now Russia has a crash program on developing energy other than fossil fuel. China has a program going on. They just had that superconductor that they launched between France and Spain that cost $10 billion that will discover the origin of the Earth as to whether or not what happened at the Big Bang Theory, if the Big Bang Theory is right. We spent $2 billion on that, John. That the biggest, and you know who killed it? John McCain when he was in the Senate. When he was with the Keating Five. John McCain is personally responsible for the death of over 400 people in airplane accidents. Arthur Walk, who was one of the finest airplane defense attorneys in the country today, who was constantly before Washington and testifying on airplane safety, on the design of aircraft. He himself is a commercial pilot, has a commercial pilot's license. He owns 2 fighter planes from World War II that he flies himself. He knows the industry. When he went to Washington to testify against Boeing in 1991, he testified that the aircraft is not safe that Boeing makes. Found out on the board is John McCain, who criticized him, coming there, how dare you challenge the investigation of the aircraft that crashed in 1993, a Boeing 707. Up until Arthur Walk went down to Washington and testified, McCain fought him like mad because when an airplane accident occurred, the National Transportation Safety Board wasn't in existence. McCain fought that. Boeing investigated its own aircraft. It was always pilot error. Yet Walt proved over the years that the aircraft are not being built safe. And who was the guy that was not instrumental in making airplanes safe for passengers? Was John McCain. Now, the Democrats have to be the dumbest people in the world when they've got the information of John McCain being part of the Keating Five that blew the S&Ls, cost us billions of dollars, responsible for the death of 5 airplanes that crashed after that, and they're worried about whether or not she's it's frustrating.
Wait, sure. They're worrying about how many houses he owns.
Yeah.
They're worrying about whether or not she was the mayor of a big city or a small town, or whether she's spent much time as a governor, whether her kid's pregnant, who the father of her child is, whether or not the Down syndrome child she has was actually her daughter's kid. I mean, this is the Democrats' problem. They're going after this woman, and I think they're making a huge mistake by doing it this way when they're letting the issues sit on the table and they're not talking about the issues. And again, the taxpayers, the voters, the citizens of the United States are going to make a big mistake because whoever it is that they vote for, they're voting on them based on a personality contest, not based on issues. Whether it's Obama or whether it's McCain, we're not getting to the meat of the situation. We're not getting to hear what's going to happen. We all want change. Well, sure we want change, but what is the change going to be? How are you going to get there? What's going to cost us? Who gets hurt by it? Talk some facts. I don't want to hear about what you did registering voters in Chicago. I don't want to hear about whether or not you got the sewer fixed in some hick town in Alaska. I want to know some hardcore information. I want to know who's going to take control of this country and be a leader. We are so desperately in want of leadership in this country. True leadership, not partisan leadership. Statesmanship. Someone to take control and someone that we can stand up and get behind and help right the ship. We're not going to have the opportunity to do that, unfortunately, because we're caught up in this name-calling, labeling situation again, just like when Kerry ran against Bush the last time. It's all about name-calling and labels, and it becomes a popularity contest. And you know what? The most popular kid in school when I went to school is the biggest doofus today. So it doesn't necessarily work, the popularity contest thing. So, just be careful out there, be cautious, pay attention, and by all means, contact the media, contact the politicians, contact whoever it is, your neighbors, tell them to stop playing into this name-calling popularity contest. That's not what selecting a president should be about.
John DiPrimio is my guest on the Reformer Show. John is the founder of Citizens for Common Sense. Going back to 1997, you can contact John at 215-572-5221, 215-572-5221, or check his website at citizensforcommonsense.net and check out and find out what John and the organization does. I don't know who handles either both McCain's publicity and the Democrats, the Republicans and the Democrats, but they leave an awful lot to be desired. And I said on this little format here that it is nobody's business who I vote for. I am not promoting Barack Obama. I'm not promoting John McCain. I'm not promoting Sarah Palin. I'm not promoting Joe Biden. I'm not promoting anybody. I go behind the booth to close the curtain so that you don't know who I vote for. But I want to hear from the listeners and the viewers as to who they're going to vote for and why. An example of something that frustrated me with this: you put the difference between a hockey mom and a pit bull. Huh? You put lipstick, and the hockey mom wears it. Well, John McCain used that many, many, many times. But the way the Democrats responded to that, you know what I would have said, John? I'd have said, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. If this vice presidential candidate, Sarah Palin, and Mr. John McCain, wants to be the president, get so bent out of, let's assume that I did refer to her. Let's assume that I did refer to Sarah Palin as a pig that puts lipstick on but is still a pig. If this is an insult to you, you better be prepared to what Putin's going to call you. You better be prepared what Chavez is going to call you. You better be prepared what Kim Jong-il is going to call you. You better be prepared what the president of China is going to call you, because if you can't deal with that, baby, you don't belong in the kitchen. You're going to get insulted from real high professionals around the world. But to get us up, talk about me. I don't care whether you talk good about me. That stupid Democrats and Barack Obama to respond the way he did was absolutely insanity.
And it takes away from his whatever his message is.
He
now
loses
he's wasted now 3 days talking about lipstick on a pig. Now I don't know in other countries if this is how politics are conducted,
Oh,
and I don't know if this is what takes place around the world. But I got news for you. I expect better. I want better. I want my kids to want better. I don't want my kids growing up today. I mean, I remember what it was like to have a real debate, a presidential. I remember what a convention was like when they went in there and they hammered out a platform.
Well, one of the conventions lasted 100 days, almost one-third of a year.
They went out into a convention and they got factions from all around the country with different ideas of what should be on the platform, and they hammered it out. You went to a convention, it was a brawl. It wasn't a. This is now a coronation. You go to a convention and it's a pep rally, just like you'd go to a pep rally at a high school football game. It's a wasted 3-4 days. Nothing gets accomplished. And I'm telling you, the people of this country, I don't want my kids growing up thinking this is really what politics is about. This is not what politics should be, and how we elect leaders.
If this is the change that both the Democrats and the Republicans are going to give us in the future of these so-called Cecil B. DeMille productions, the signs are already made. They look like they're a spontaneous sign. Those signs have been made, prepared, balloons coming out. What is this, a football game? This is serious stuff. We're involved in a world today that requires statesmanship, salesmanship, articulation, and smarts. I don't see it on the on the horizon, John. And as you said, it frightens me to see what's happening to this country. This can be a great country, but I don't see it with these two political parties that are here today, and that's what frightens me. Now, as far as Mentz is concerned, going back to Vince Fumo, I have to tell you a little story. Marvin Burek and I, when I first got interested in radio, before I was ever behind the microphone, went to a Mensa meeting. Marvin was a Mensa member, and he hated snobbery, and Mensa is nothing but a bunch of snobs who, I don't know what. Well, we drove there in my Cadillac, right? And we looked in the parking lot. There was only one Cadillac. There was mine. And Marvin got up and they introduced us. And I said, well, he said, you're all Mensa members? Yes, well. He said, well, there's only one Cadillac in the parking lot, and it belongs to him. And I don't think he would pass Mensa. And we left. So we got solicited by him. I don't know whether that's a claim to fame or not, but it was just a funny incident. John DiPrimio is my guest. Our chat room is available. Citizens for Common Sense is the organization that John has founded in 1997. And John's website is citizensforcommonsense.net. You can hear John on WNPV out of Lansdale from 12 to 1. When it's at the 28th?
Well, I'm going. My next show will be on the 24th of September.
24th of September. And
I'm going to have a special guest on
and
the
he'll
show,
have
too.
a special guest. He'll mention it later. Now, John, you had mentioned, the good old days and Harry Truman. I just want to reflect a little bit back. The world was a lot simpler then. Harry was a failed haberdasher. In fact, he didn't make any money at it. And the world was a lot simpler then. And we had the protection of our borders, and we had the protection of the oceans. So I don't think that the qualifications up until the time we became globalized was that important as it is today. I think the qualifications to be president, vice president,
I understand. I absolutely appreciate that, and I agree with you. It is more complicated today, and we do expect more, and it is a far more dangerous, complicated world that we live in. The only point that I was making was, and I've had this conversation with other people, when we elect the president in this country, my furthest recollection, I guess, goes back to John F. Kennedy. And all the presidents since then. I mean, he was highly popular, very handsome,
Camelot.
Everyone was in love with JFK. But was he qualified to be president? I don't know. I mean, was Lyndon Baines Johnson qualified to be president? Some people would argue absolutely not. And he wasn't
And
a good
Gerald Ford.
president. And Gerald Ford. And was Ronald Reagan, when he was elected, qualified to be president? I don't know. I think people grow into president. I don't think they are elected president and because they are qualified. I don't think anyone's really qualified to step into that office. I think that what they do, however, is they grow into the position and they surround themselves with the people that either make or break their presidencies.
Well, that's the point that I think we should expand on, and that is, who is John McCain and Sarah Palin, if they win, going to surround themselves with a Secretary of Defense, a Secretary of Energy, maybe a Homeland Security, and who is Barack Obama and Joe Biden going to surround themselves with? They're the advisors. Under this present administration, we had Donald Rumsfeld. Whatever happened to Donald Rumsfeld? Where did he disappear from?
Well, he was at the ceremonies at 9/11 in New York yesterday, or at the Pentagon, giving a speech.
I don't blame him, and then he disappeared, and so where are all these great advisors that surrounded Wolfowitz and Pearl and all of these guys that surrounded President Bush? He suddenly finally and the head of Homeland Security, who sold Arabian horses, or FEMA, that had sold Arabian horses. So I mean, if we're going to have presidents today and vice presidents, either Democrat or Republican, I think we should be also careful and scrutinize those people who they select as Secretary of State or cabinet members.
I almost wish that they'd give us a little warning to let us know what their intentions are and who they're going to try to get appointed to these positions. So I think it would give us, the electorate, some insight into where this administration will go if elected. But they hold that close to the vest, and you never know until they get in there. I mean, had we known that George Bush was going to have the people that he selected for his cabinet prior to his election, I don't know that he would have gotten elected. And conversely, you had Ronald Reagan. Whether you liked him or you didn't like him, he had a pretty decent cabinet handling affairs around him. Bill Clinton had a good cabinet around him. I don't know that Bill Clinton again was qualified to be president, governor of a small state when he came in. But he grew into that office now, didn't he?
Well, does the president make the man, or does the man make the president?
Yeah, so you don't know. All you can do is hope that you have someone with the right intentions, with enough smarts and background and ability to know that they can't do everything. They can't micromanage the job. That they have to be able to relegate responsibility to people and have the ability and counsel with other people to select people that will be key advisors during their presidencies, and that's key, I think.
Is it? And I try my best to avoid listening to the syndicated talk radio. It has been such a deterioration, in my opinion, of objectivity and information that there must be, whether the Democrats or the Republicans get in, a review of syndicated radio and the massive ownership of individual corporate heads. We have corporate news today, owned by corporation, controlled by corporations. GE owns this, they own that. Evergreen owns this. Metro Media owns this, and it is just an abomination. We do not have the type of talk radio that the country deserves. It's talking heads with bias and prejudice toward one particular candidate or one particular political party, with the answer being, well, there's an opposition called Air America to the present talk radio. Well, Air America is a joke. Incidentally, Al Franken just won in the Democratic.
He got the nomination for the Democrats in Minnesota, right?
In Minnesota. But Al Franken is a joke. He's a disgrace to liberalism, in my opinion. And so is Alan Colmes, a disgrace to liberalism on Hannity and Colmes. So it's a whole matter of more scrutiny by the public. The unfortunate thing is, John, of 300 million people, I think only about 26% are really informed about the election, and that's frightening.
It is, and I think it doesn't bode well for the future of this nation and for the future of our children.
We have some questions. Okay, our chat room is open, ladies and gentlemen, for John DiPrimio, Citizens for Common Sense. Once again, their website, citizensforcommonsense.net. And check out their website, the telephone number if you want to contact them, 215-572-5221. And our first question on the chat room.
Okay, this first statement goes in with this question. As a network administrator, when you say Fumo deleted his emails, well, if you even though he deleted his emails, a good network administrator can recover his emails, especially if he deleted his emails off of the computer, his work computer. So basically, the network administrator could probably just say, well, the emails are still there, so they might not exactly be deleted. Now, this question is from Art from Philadelphia. Yeah. Regardless of Fumo's guilt or innocence, he has a problem with the concept of destroyed emails as evidence. How can the courts use what no longer exists as evidence, particularly when some government agencies claim they can recover anything ever done on a computer?
I think that the testimony of those people who have made a deal with the feds could possibly be strong enough if the credibility of the witness has been checked. I don't think the feds are going to use that particular indictment as their sole indictment. Somebody confessed someplace that this was said, and even Sprague said, I never told him about that. Sprague just said, well, that's against the law. Why would I do that? There's a lot of questions there.
And it's the act of destroying the emails that's the obstruction of justice charge.
Even though they can recover it.
That he's indicted with, because it's the intent of trying to escape prosecution by destroying evidence is what they're going after. Whether how it happened, whether one of his surrogates did it as a result of talking to him about it or not. I mean, that's really the essence of the indictment. It's not what was in the email necessarily, but it was the act of destroying it.
I think isn't Larry Mente?
Larry Mente was pled guilty not to destroying it, but just to reading someone else's email.
Bob from Mentis. John, you're right when you only have two parties that write ethic laws and can tie it up in committee. Now, CREW, which I guess that's short for, and it's an acronym, they just posted the top 20 wrongdoers in Congress. And that was the statement. Now,
Yeah, we mentioned it the other day.
all right, okay, here's a question. From Bob from Memphis. Sounds like...
Bob from where?
Memphis.
Memphis?
Yeah.
Okay, I know where that's at.
Down south.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds
Welcome,
like the
Bob.
Kennedy October missile crisis with Bush pushing missile around Russia, and this is Russia's response. Will they back off like Khrushchev?
Well, I think that one of the things that my first reaction when I heard about the bombers landing in Venezuela was that this is kind of like a counterpunch to the defense missile system that we're putting in Eastern Europe. And so I thought maybe the Russians might be doing this as an attempt to let us know that they're still here and willing to do the dance if it comes to that. Again, it's always one-upsmanship. It's always the Cold War was always about point counterpoint, back and forth between the two nations. I think Russia's posturing again. We've been posturing, and so this is where it's leaded. We're going back into that whole Cold War mentality again.
But our posturing has been with getting Georgia into and Ukraine into NATO, and this is an aggressive move, allegedly with no agreement or treaty with Bolivia or Venezuela, and they just sent these bombers over here, maybe to test our air defense to do it. They just didn't send them over here for a reason. Going back to Khrushchev, though, John, when he had the confrontation with Kennedy with the missile crisis in Cuba, we weren't dependent on the oil, and Russia didn't have that oil and that energy power that they've got today.
And we import 15% of our oil from Venezuela.
From Venezuela. And if you don't like it, use Lukoil, which is Russian. So Russia is in a much better position today, economically, than she was under the days of Khrushchev. And that's why I said earlier in the program that we should make a concerted effort to develop some type of alternative fuel. It's hard for me to believe. And didn't they at one time, John, what was it, the Wankel engine that was supposed to eliminate Using gasoline or something
Yeah,
increasing?
the rotary,
You
the
can't-
Wankel rotary.
You can't tell me, ladies and gentlemen, that we can't have an energy concept. First of all, get rid of all the damn plastic in America and you'll save oil like crazy. The furniture in this studio is all oil derivative, oil based. The carpets, the drapes, the furniture, everything is oil derivative. Plastic bags, oil derivative. Excuse me, even cosmetics have an oil derivative base. So let's go back to paper. Okay, paper. Trees grow again. Planting and you can have all the trees you want to. This nonsense that it's only gasoline and heating oil, and we haven't gotten into heating oil yet, what it's going to cost a day for heating oil. But Americans aren't even embarrassed with the fact that Chavez from Venezuela provides oil, heating oil, for poor people in America with a 40% discount. You can't embarrass Americans. You can't embarrass Americans on today's news, John. The baby formula made in China has melanin in it, and now they're going to recall it. Who? What person, what American in your right mind would feed your baby formula packaged in China?
A person that can't afford formula made in the United States.
And maybe they just hate their kid.
And well, look, there's people that shop at these stores that everything's $1 or less, and these discount houses, these national chains. We know who they are. The 90% of the products, 99% of the products on the shelves are all made in China, and people are shopping there. I mean, you go to the parking lots, and the lots are full.
I understand. So are you saying, John? And I've said it before, and I say it again, capitalism cannot work unless there's a slave labor.
No,
It cannot work. America never worked successfully with its capitalist system unless there was slave labor. Whether it was the coal mines, whether it was the automobile industry, whether it was non-union labor, American capitalism cannot work unless there is slave labor. We don't have slave labor in America. Oh, yes, we do. We've got 11 million or 20 million illegal immigrants here working at slave labor, and we now use the Chinese slaves to make our goods and services. And if you say that, oh, you're anti-American, well, prove to me that I'm wrong. Find me somebody that'll cut your grass for what I pay the gentleman that cuts my lawn and shovels my snow, who has probably illegal immigrants. I never checked their green card. As John said, I pay the guy. I can't get anybody else to do it. So what do I care? I said to the guy, thanks. You don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. Any other questions?
Yes. Do you think Russia will be the new superpower, and what do you think of Russia putting a flag at the bottom of the Arctic?
John, I'll let you answer that first.
Well, I don't know what the definition of a superpower is anymore. I mean, the definition of a superpower is who has the more bombs or more bombers. I don't know that Russia's going to be able to. I think actually China is going to become the superpower. China, we've financially bolstered that nation to the extent that they have more money to dispense and to spend for their military infrastructure than any nation on the earth. And that's, they don't worry about taking care of the people that live there. They don't worry about social programs so much, but they sure enough take a piece of every industry in that country, goes back to the central government, and then they use that to buy nuclear submarines and missiles and bombs, and so I'd be more concerned about China becoming the next superpower and they have the manpower to back up whatever missile system they put online. I mean, they have a population over there that supersedes Russia and the United States put together.
Superpower at one time, I believe, to the viewer and John, used to be the country with the biggest bombs and the biggest air force and the biggest navy. They learned that America can outspend Russia, and so the Cold War was ended. It never really ended. The Cold War has been postponed, that's all. Russia never ended the Cold War. Communist Party and ideology is still as powerful in Russia as it ever was, also in China. Now, superpower today is who's got the bucks. Who's got the bucks? And China learned it from us. Russia learned it from us. Russia realized that they could not outspend America. We were willing to go in debt up to our behinds. England, all of the free nations of the world, realize, and they realize because of nuclear power, it would be the end of the world. We drop a nuke, they drop a nuke, mutual assured destruction, blah, blah, blah. So superpower today, I think, has a different meaning. Superpower today is a guy that walks in with gold, with natural resources, with oil, with gas, and says, guess what? You want gas, you want oil, you'll buy it from me, and only me. And if I want you to pay $7 a gallon for gasoline, you're going to pay $7 for gasoline. So I think superpower today doesn't actually mean bombs, submarines, aircraft, etc. Superpower to me today is, and Benjamin Disraeli said it many years ago in England, he says, I care not who wears the crown, just who controls the money. And I think money is power, and unfortunately, since we don't have the natural resources that we need to keep our standard of living up, we're at the mercy of those people with the natural resources, and they're getting all of our money. And as Thomas Friedman said in his book, he'd much rather pay $7 a gallon for gasoline and buy American gasoline that's going to go back in to fix American roads than pay $5 a gallon for gasoline or $4 a gallon and pave the Arab roads. So we've got to get our act together in this country. If you're going to be a superpower today, you've got to have money, which is power. And that's why I think the definition of what superpower used to be as to what it is today are two different things.
This one's for John. You're special. It's from Vince from Langhorne. How did the woman that you had on your one show that was running against Vince Fumo, how did she do?
She that was Ann Dicker, and she did not fare well in the primary, in the Democratic primary, and she didn't run against Vince Fumo. She ran against two other attorneys that were running to fill the spot that Vince Fumo was vacating. So she did not fare well. I think she came in a distant second in the Democratic primary.
Well, she was pretty good. I heard that program.
Yeah, she was.
And was a pretty good candidate.
She was a community activist, and she was involved with the anti-casino movement in Philadelphia. She was also against all the cronyism and all the corruption in the state capitol. So she knew her stuff. She was on point. But she didn't have the backing and the scratch, the money, the connections. The guy that ultimately won was the hand-picked successor of Vince Fumo by Vince Fumo.
We're taking your calls and questions on the chat room with John DiPrimio. Send us a comment. Said, let me respond to something you said about, and this is what John McCain and Barack Obama are both saying, that they've got to get rid of the special interests and the lobbyists in Washington and, be their own man. John McCain wants to be the maverick. Barack Obama says we need change. That came up on Inside Story once when Marjorie Margolis-Medzinski, who was former congresswoman, who was a strong supporter of Hillary Clinton, came up and she said to the panel, she said, let me tell you something about lobbyists. She said, there's many things that come down in the open marketplace of ideas and products and inventions that we know nothing about. And she said, it is only through some of these lobbyists, and you have to be very careful, she said, of course, to find out something that may be beneficial, A, to your constituents, and B, to the country as a whole. So she says, you can't just point brush and say we're going to get rid of lobbyists. What she did say was, there should be a filtering system of lobbyists who are looking for nothing but political power and special privilege, and lobbyists that are presenting things to Congress or to the Senate that are beneficial to the constituents and to the country. Does that make sense?
Oh, I absolutely. I have the same issue with drug reps calling on doctors and giving doctors pertinent information about new science, new therapies, new medications. Where I differ with the use of these drug salesmen and their connection with the physicians are when they start ingratiating the physicians, when they start giving them incentives either through merchandise or through meals or through a trip or through cash. I mean, there's a whole connection now of drug companies and physicians and being induced to use their products, and now you wonder whether or not you're being prescribed a medication because it's the best medication or because it's a return for a dinner at a fancy restaurant, or for a trip to Jamaica, or for some other reason. And I think that connection, that trust between the patient and the doctor, it comes into question now when you see what's the relationship between the drug rep and the doctor. And it's the same thing with the lobbyist. Do you need the connection? Do you need to get the information? Yes.
But there has to be
a filtering system, and it can't be some quid pro quo.
That's why I think it was informative and instrumental in changing my opinion, but filtering those lobbyists so that they don't have a vested interest.
This one's about the Freddie and Fannie Mae.
Right.
Irvin John, do you think the bailout of Freddie and Fannie will take place once the true nature of the loss is discovered, or will it fall through? And that's from Bill from Pennsylvania.
I think there's going to absolutely be a bailout. It's already happened. They're talking about $200 million to bail these organizations out, and I think that I'm sorry, what was that? $2 billion. I'm sorry, and I think it's absolutely taking place. There's no doubt about it. It has to take place, because if those two organizations collapse, you'll have 20 big, large banks collapse alongside of them. This country will go into a depression, the likes of which will make 1929 look like a picnic. So I think they have to prop them up. I think the risk is far too great not to allow these. Do I like it? I don't like it.
What I dislike about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the bailout of the government, I want the names of the board of directors of Freddie Mac and of Fannie Mae. I want to know who these people are, how they got the jobs, and why is the head of Freddie Mac getting a $10 million golden parachute, and why is the guy from Fannie Mae getting, $6 million? What kind of... You go broke in this country by screwing the public, taking money off and they end up becoming millionaires. So if they publish the names of these people, were they politically connected? How did they get the job? Where did they come from? I think the head of either Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac was the former head of the company that went bankrupt. One of the biggest investment houses went bankrupt. He's the head. So where did these people come from? Isn't there any personal culpability for these people? Or they just get billions of dollars of people's mortgage money, get all type of special favorite legislation through Congress, and then, we went broke, the government will bail you out. Well, the government is you and me. We're bailing them out. They may have a mortgage on one of my properties. I don't know. Now I got to bail myself out with my own money after I wasn't the cause? I want to know the names of those people, and I want them in jail.
And the last one for tonight, Irvin John. John, you have both complained about Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and all the Bush disaster. Are you seriously still supporting Republicans like McClain, Palin, and all the other cronies that will surely follow? Clinton left us with the best economy ever, and now we are on the brink of economic disaster.
Well, let me just say this, and then I'm sure Irv will have his opinion as well. I'm looking to vote for who I think is the best candidate. I cannot do that, regardless of party. Stop the party nonsense. A good Republican 20 years ago doesn't make every Republican after that a good Republican. A good Democrat 8 years ago doesn't make every Democrat a good president. So let's get away from this comparison between Clinton and Reagan and God knows who else down the line. Let's go back and find out who the best person today is, regardless of party. We can't do that if we're stuck in the past and if we're calling people names today.
Well, the thing that I fear, John, more than anything else, is that we are now a reactionary country. We react to world events. Under this administration in the last 8 years, we are not the leaders of the world. We react to everything. We reacted to the attack at 9/11, which I still think it was Saudi Arabia and had nothing to do with what's his face in the desert someplace. So we got to change from being a reactionary country to a world leader again, with respect and honesty among our politicians, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, and establish the fact that America is the greatest country in the world. It has more freedom than any country in the world. We open our hearts to more. We just give $1 billion to Georgia. We give $300 million for AIDS in Africa. We give money away like drunken sailors. We are the best country in the world. I don't want this country to be a reactionary country. And what I see under the Bush administration for the past 8 years has been we've been a reactionary country and not a world leader. We must be a world leader in moral turpitude. We must be a leader in which when we say something, we mean it for the best interest of the world, but the best interest of the United States must be held. I'm not happy with any of the candidates. I'm not happy with any of the parties. It's none of your business what I'm voting for, and it is none of my business who you're voting for. I just hope we survive. John, I think that's about it, isn't it, Ron? Well, thanks so much, John. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Once again, John will be sitting in for me if I decide to go on vacation and get under the rug and dig out some money. This broadcast is from IrvHomer.com. Website is www.irvhomer.com. And if you want to email me, evilerv@irvhomer.com. And this is brought to you by RGH Computer Services. For all your computer problems, give them a call at 215-322-8685. Check John DiPrimio's website, citizensforcommonsense.net. Their telephone number, once again, is 215-572-5221. On September the 24th, John will be on WNPV at 1440 from 12 to 1. And stay tuned around the dials. You never know where this guy's going to pop up. Till then, we'll see you later.
Thanks, sir.